Hello and welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death and experiences in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I trust that the conversations within this podcast will offer value, insight and information into what happens in the afterlife. To find out more about the free online community and extra content, be sure to click subscribe and to check out the links in the notes below. And now, let's get into today's episode.
The doctor took the clamp off too early and I bled out. And basically I died. And so they fast and furious was trying to bring me back to life. But during that time, I'm on the table and I start lifting out of my body. So I'm getting farther off the table toward the ceiling of the OR, and all these swirling angels, I call them rainbow angels, those rainbow lights swirling all around me. And they were saying, Mike's coming home. Mike's coming home. So, as a believer, the Bible says when a loved one dies, a Christian dies, the angels rejoice that they're coming into the heavenly kingdom. And so they were singing, Mike's coming home. They were so excited that I was traveling to heaven. And then I heard the Lord say, no, he's just here for a visit.
Welcome back to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast, where we talk about life, death and experiences in between. I'm Kirsty Salisbury, the host of your show. And today we've got another amazing episode. Today I'm chatting with Mike Olsen, who underwent a double lung transplant after being diagnosed with IPF, which is idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. That was in 2014. And after that, Mike was on oxygen for 5 years. Amazing. Mike since had 56 surgeries since that transplant. So much has gone on for him, and now he's currently raising awareness for this disease following his diagnosis. It was during his transplant that he had his near-death experience. He was a pastor at the time, and he shares how he went to heaven and he met Jesus. So Mike Olsen, welcome to the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. I'm so excited to have you here. You have been through the ringer. You've had so much happen to you on a physical level.
Yeah.
Where does the story start?
Well, thanks for having me, by the way. And I'd like to share my story. I only recently started sharing it. I was sharing my near-death experience with family and friends and some church members that knew me. But on a larger scale, I just didn't want to share it right away. And because there was a lot to absorb when you have a near-death experience. So, but then I felt like, this is something I really feel like everyone could benefit from. So I said, I'm going to start doing this. So let me see, where should I start? Okay. So back in 2014, probably in 2012, in Kentucky here in the United States, we had a horrible snow and ice storm, and I got pneumonia. During that storm, I got pneumonia. My wife and I and my dogs, we had to huddle around a wood stove in the living room because there was no electricity for 2 weeks. So during that time, I wound up going to the ER emergency room because I wound up having pneumonia. It was during that time that I didn't read the doctor's report. Right on the doctor's report, it said, looks like pulmonary fibrosis. But just like any man, I stuck the report in my jacket and, just didn't pay attention. So I started having breathing difficulties that whole following year, 2013 and 2014. So I was going to an allergist and he said, man, you're coming in almost every month with bronchitis or some pulmonary issues. I need to send you to a pulmonologist. So in 2014, he sends me to a pulmonologist, and he did some X-rays and scans, and he said, you know what? It looks like you have idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, but I want to make sure. So we need to do an open lung biopsy. So I went to surgery and they took a piece of my lung. And that was the old fashioned way of doing it, because now they don't do that, because if you cut into a scarred, diseased tissue, it's going to spread. The disease is going to spread. So unfortunately, that's what they did. They cut into my diseased tissue and it did start spreading. And so right after my surgery, my open lung biopsy surgery, I was put on oxygen 24/7. So I was going downhill pretty quick. But during that time, I decided, we can either get bitter or better in our circumstances of life. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to do my best to make awareness to this terminal lung disease that is killing more than breast cancer. And so, I got to do something about it. So I started meeting with politicians, celebrities, anybody who would listen to me, and, to spread awareness about this disease. So that's what I did. So anyway, during that time of bringing awareness throughout the country, actually throughout the United States, I started failing very quickly. And so I was on oxygen for about 5 years. And about the fourth year, going into the latter end of the fourth year on oxygen, I told my wife something's really wrong. And I was taking medication that was like cancer medication, just slow down the progression of the scarring in my lungs, which, it did buy me more time, because in 2014, they only gave me 2 years to live. They said, get your affairs in order. And so I lasted into 2019. Yeah. So just at the very beginning. So anyway, so I was going downhill pretty fast. And interesting thing happened right before my NDE experience. So my wife and I, we do other things beside pastoring. I'm a folk artist. My wife is a musician. And so I was out in my back cabin in our backyard where my art supplies were. And I was getting ready to do a gallery opening for lung disease. And I was doing a lot of folk art. So I'm out there in the back of the cabin and working on all my folk art. And I heard the Lord's voice said, you need to put that up. Put it up now. And I thought, wow, that's really weird. Why would you even be concerned about my art supplies? So I just said, I'm going to obey. So I started packing it all away, and I came across the yard, up the stairs of the porch in the backyard. And my wife said, Mike, the hospital just called. They have a set of lungs for you. And I was overwhelmed because, struggling for 5 years, always waking up, grateful for one another day. But I never thought, I'd never imagined life without this disease, really. And I was like so worried that I was going to die and leave my wife behind. And so anyway, she said, the hospital's called. And they have a perfect match for you and your blood type. And so we headed off to the hospital. And it was really surreal. So we get to the hospital, and I've been doing a lot of awareness for this disease. I've been on TV a lot here in the United States. One of my stories won an Emmy Award, which I really find amazing and funny, because before I went to the ministry, I was an actor in New York in musical theater. And so I gave all that up. So I gave all that up. I gave all that up, and I entered into the ministry. So the funny thing was, the newscaster here in town did a story about me, and it won an Emmy Award. And he invited me to the Emmys, and he said, when he got the award, he pulled me up on stage and said, "This is your award. It's engraved. Your name's on it. I mean, it's like, I'm dying. Will you help? That's you, Mike." So he had me address the Emmy crowd, and I looked up to heaven and I said, God, you have a sense of humor.
Yeah.
So, whatever we give up in life, which we think we're giving up, a major thing in our life,
Yeah.
God always turns things around and opens doors beyond our imagination. So there I have this Emmy sitting in my house to remind me that God sees all. So it's funny because I look at this and I go, I'm just a small town pastor in Kentucky. And, I look at this Emmy Award and I just chuckle, and I always tease everybody and said, wow, it took dying to get noticed around here.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I went to the hospital and they were prepping me and, they had to shave for a man, they had to shave my chest and put a port in my neck and get everything all prepared. So I thought I was going in, and I thought, man, I escaped, death through terminal lung disease. And so the last thing I knew, I was being wheeled in to the OR, and they said, well, we're giving you some sedatives, and then we're going to give you the anesthesia, and you'll see in 12 hours. So it's a really arduous surgery. So anyway, while I was in surgery, my wife was home on this exact front porch that I'm sitting on. And I had about, I want to say 30 oxygen tanks on the porch, because when they delivered them, I would just take what I needed inside and then use them. So anyway, my wife was exhausted. They told her, just go home. We'll keep you updated about Mike. So all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, the oxygen tank fell. And these things are heavy. And it fell on the front porch, boing. And my wife woke up and she said, Mike. So she called the hospital, and the hospital said, one lung in. So she was like, okay. So then she called hours later, and second lung was in. So I went, from that point though, she didn't know. On the operating table, before they sutured me up, because I was cut across my chest, clamshell, and because they break open the rib cage to remove the old lungs. Yeah. And anyway, when I'm on the table and they're about to close me up, the doctor took the clamp off too early, and I bled out, and basically I died. Yeah. So they fast and furious was trying to bring me back to life. But during that time, I'm on the table and I start lifting out of my body. I start rising above my body. And I'm such a jokester. So I said to myself, hey, at least I'm going up. And so I thought, this is good. I'm going the right direction. So anyway, but when I was off the table, I don't know how many feet off the table, all of a sudden I heard these voices, and they weren't kind voices. And the voices were saying, you're not good enough. Who do you think you are? Just accusatory voices. And being from a Christian tradition, I kind of knew where those voices were coming from. And I said to them, those voices, I said, you can't talk to me like that. I'm a child of the living God. You shut up. And those voices stopped and never uttered a word. So as I went further, this is where I get emotional, because every time I tell the story, I kind of almost relive it.
Yeah. So
I'm getting farther off the table toward the ceiling of the OR, and all these swirling angels, I call them rainbow angels. It was rainbow lights swirling all around me, myriads of angels. And I'm just looking at it all, and like incredible, like what is happening? And but then all of a sudden I heard them singing. It was a beautiful sound that I've never heard on earth. And it was a beautiful, majestic voices. And they were saying, Mike's coming home. Mike's coming home. So, as a believer, the Bible says when a loved one dies, a Christian dies, the angels rejoice that they're coming into the heavenly kingdom. And so they were singing, Mike's coming home. They were so excited that I was traveling to heaven. And then I heard the Lord say, no, he's just here for a visit. And I was like, wow. And all of a sudden, I was in heaven instantly. And it was bright white light as far as the eye can see. I'm standing there. And just this overwhelming feeling came over me. I couldn't remember any bad thing I ever did. I couldn't remember my sin, my shortcomings, my mistakes in life. It was like it was all washed away. And I'm thinking, and I'm standing there, and this epiphany, I call it. I realized, Jesus, you fill every molecule in this place, and I just feel your presence, and Lord, it's all you. And then I got this feeling like, wow, I wasted time on the earth. I was striving of worrying about my finances, worrying about my faith, my faith, worrying if I did enough or loved enough, and then I was worried about, my spouse and my health. And I just found in that instant, that moment in heaven, I thought wow, we waste so much time on trivial matters or even matters that concern us that are hard, but we still overthink. So as I'm thinking all these thoughts, there was no condemnation. There was total bliss. And all of a sudden, out of my spirit, it raised up out of me. And I thought, wait a second. I know I died, but this guy, girl, whoever gave me their lungs so I could live. And I wanted to thank the donor. So I said, it's like I wasn't speaking. It sounded like I was speaking, but it was like, I can't explain, but it was coming out of my spirit. And I just heard myself say, I want to thank my donor. And I stood there, and all of a sudden I looked behind. I felt a presence, and Jesus and the donor were coming toward me.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I just looked like it was like, this is where my heart was, to thank this person. Because before I went into transplant surgery, I thought when they said you have to call, I couldn't help but think someone lost a loved one. Someone lost their loved one. So I wanted to honor that donor when I got to heaven.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, Jesus came and he put his hand on my left shoulder. And he said, Mike, these are your new lungs. Receive them. And in an instant, I started floating back into the OR. And it was amazing. And then at that point, I was in a coma for 10 days. So I don't really remember how long I was there. Things are coming back to me. I don't know, like a monthly basis, I'd say, But anyway, I was in a coma. So while I was in a coma, my wife was doing a renovation of our bathroom because it had mold. Well, as a transplant patient, a double lung transplant patient, there can't be any mold in the home where I'm going to be living. Yeah. So she's working on renovating the bathroom where they found mold, renovating the basement where they found mold. And so her sister came over to help her from another state. And they're sitting on the couch in the living room. And Patty just stared at my sister-in-law and said, Kay, I don't know how I know this. Mike went to heaven and got to thank his donor. And her sister looked at her like, okay, well, that's strange.
Yeah.
So my wife, Patty, she really didn't know because I was in a coma. I was intubated, the tube. I couldn't breathe on my own. They didn't know if I was going to make it. So she was just like, I don't know how I know this. So she gets a call from a friend during those first couple of days, the day I died, which none of them knew I died. Patty only found that out when she went to see me in the in the ICU. And she asked the nurse, my husband bled out? That sounds like he died. And the nurse said, yeah, he died. And they violently brought him back to life. And, with a lot of units of blood. And and I have a gash on top of my head for where they were, I guess it was pretty violent to get this dude back to earth and back to functioning. But anyway, she got a call from a friend at the time that I died. And this young man, he says, this has never happened to me. But I was in my bedroom sleeping. And he said, all of a sudden, I got woken up by an audible voice of God in my room. And the voice said, Mike is with me. He said, Patty, I didn't want to call you. I didn't want to let you know that your husband's dead. And I don't know why God would come and say that in my bedroom. It startled me. It was just crazy. So then a few days later, he gets awakened again in his bedroom, and the audible voice of God comes and says, he's back and he's going to be okay. All this is happening during my NDE. So then, Patty, normally you're intubated after a double lung transplant for 3 days, maybe, or even the next day, you get the tube taken out. Well, I was intubated 10 days plus. So Patty goes, they're taking the tube out today after 10 days. And she says to my friend Jeff, I'm going to tell you the story, Jeff. When Mike was in ICU and, he died on the table, I was home with my sister, and God said that Mike has gone to heaven and met his donor. And Jeff's like, oh, really? So Jeff goes, I'll go with you to the hospital. He was like a little doubter. So in comes my wife, Patty, and Jeff. And Jeff goes, let me do the talking, Patty. So they're watching the ICU nurse taking the breathing tube out of my throat. So I was like wide-eyed and so grateful that tube was coming out of my throat. And they said, just be careful when you start talking, because you're going to talk like a couple of octaves lower because you have so much trauma to your throat. So Jeff goes, hey, Mike, he's Scandinavian. I'm Norwegian, my family heritage. And then he's another Scandinavian country. I can't remember where he's from. He's going to kill me. Oh, anyway, we're rivals.
That way,
yeah. So, so Swedish. There it is. He's a Swede and I'm a Norwegian. There we go. Yeah. So he gets to the ICU and he says, Patty, let me talk. And he says, hey, Mike, when you were out in the Netherlands, did you experience anything? And in my gravelly, low voice, I said, yeah, I went to heaven and I got to thank my donor. And their eyes got as big as saucers. And Patty goes, I told you, Jeff. I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew it. So anyway, it's been a wild ride. So I couldn't get home to my house after I was in ICU and after I got extubated. But I was telling my wife about the NDE experience, and she says, you can't come home for a couple months because we're still working on the house. So I had to go stay at a friend's house who had an Airbnb. And anyway, when I finally got home to my house, I went to my bedroom. My wife went off to work. She had to go back to work. And I'm laying in bed. And I have a Cavalier King Charles Spaniel dog, several of them. Anyway, I'm laying in bed. The dogs always lay around with me.
Yeah.
So anyway, I was laying in bed, and all of a sudden, I look straight ahead out the window in my bedroom, and right in the corner of the bedroom, I see an angel from ceiling to floor. And the angel was just staring at me.
Yeah.
And it disappeared. And I threw up a quick prayer. I said, Lord, what was that? What was that?
Totally.
And he said, Mike, I heard his voice. And he said, Mike, they're still watching you. You know what? Heaven is so real. And these angels must have been intrigued about me. And he sent one after the transplant to remind me, your trip to heaven? All those angels you saw?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still with you every day of your life. They're with you. They watch you. And I tell everybody, whatever, no matter what amount of suffering or pain or heartache or sorrow you're going through, know this, that God is much bigger than your problem, much bigger than anything you're going through. And he has agents of mercy and grace called heavenly angels that he sends. And how many people, I don't think they realize the activity of the angels in our lives, the things they spare us from, and the things they try to encourage us in our day-to-day life. And so when that angel came, I was like, wow, Lord, that's pretty cool. And, they're watching us. They're watchers of heaven. And he just came back. Came to earth to show me, we still got you, Mike. And so at that time, I started going to surgery every Friday, because when I died on the table, I developed what was called bronchial stenosis. So in other words, all my bronchial tubes were scarred shut. And so I was having difficult breathing even after transplant. So I went every Friday for the first year. So the nurses started calling me the Friday special. Here comes the Friday special. And so there I was. But you know what? I was able to tell my NDE story to nurses, to people I came in contact with. And you know what? It really encouraged them, because they knew me. They knew I had died on the table. They knew something happened because I was brought back. And I tell everybody, I was brought back for a purpose. Just share my story to encourage people. Like that book says, don't sweat small stuff. Like really, I've been through a lot of pain and suffering in the past 2.5 years after transplant. And you know what? I still think, hey, I went to heaven. I know and experienced that powerful supernatural presence of an almighty God, and kindness and love and purity. And so it kind of just made me, I just walk different here on the earth.
Yeah.
I just do. It's just like, I give one example. A lot of us, we go through life and we see suffering, or we see things around us that, sometimes it's overwhelming. It's hard to take it all in. But just to give you an example of, you see some homeless people, and in every country we see homeless people on the street begging or whatever. And so here in Kentucky, it's no different. And there were some beggars on the side of the highway. And the old Mike, pre-transplant, I don't know. I just got jaded, I think. And I would say, look at that guy. He has a brand new pair of sneakers and a brand new backpack. That's more than I have, at the time, right? And I would try to just say, he doesn't need money. He wants it for booze. He wants it for something else. And so, granted, there's people out there that desperately need help. So, but anyway, even as a pastor, you think I would have some, humility and some compassion. And I did. But, sometimes you see it over and over again. So anyway, when I got back from heaven, man, that changed. So I look at everybody now. I said, what's their story? What are they going through? God loves them so much. God is always reaching out to man in one form, shape, or another to draw them to that peaceful kingdom, to draw them and to let them know you were born for a purpose. It may not seem like you have a lot in life, but your life makes a difference. Where you were born, what you're doing right now, you make a difference in someone's life. And I tell everybody, you know what? We are all interconnected in one way or another.
Yeah.
And
100%.
we touch each other's lives. Some people think, it's the big things in life. I'm so successful. I have a really nice house and nice furniture, nice clothes, whatever floats your boat. But it really doesn't matter in the long haul, in the big scheme of life. It's how do you treat your neighbor? How do you treat the grocery clerk when you go to the store? That's what I came back with. Like, love one another. Love.
Totally. The little things are so often actually the big things. It's resonating with me so strongly, Mike. I love this. And all the way through as you're talking, I'm just hearing such a kindness. You've got such a positive outlook on it. Like, I know that you've been through some awful things since this has happened, that you've really faced quite a lot, but you're talking about the goodness, the love, the kindness, the fact that you wanted to go and meet your donor and say thank you. It says such a huge amount by who you are at that deeper level, and just, you know, the way that you are driven. I love how you talk about, I don't know your exact words, but you were saying along the lines of we're all striving, we're focusing in on things, and that often they don't even matter. That you got that perspective in your experience that a lot of things that we focus on here don't matter.
Yeah. And so,
I absolutely love it.
My mantra, and I think it was even before my transplant, is make every breath count.
Oh, I like that.
You live life to the fullest. I mean, and you just make every day count. Even the little things, like my wife and I took a little drive out in the country this weekend, and we went to her hometown. She showed me her old high school and her old middle school, and and it was like it was just a drive in the country, and it was fun. And then I thought of someone who had IPF, who was in the same town. I said, "Hey, Patty, I want to go see Rick because I know he's struggling. He has oxygen cannulas up his nose." And I said, "Let's stop in and see him." And we did. And he has IPF. And I said, "Hey, Rick, we're just popping over to say hi." And that's what matters. Just being there for people. If something comes across your mind, you haven't heard from someone in a while, call them or write someone a letter.
Definitely.
Just do something proactive in your life. I find a lot of times when we go through a lot of things in our life, when we look outside ourselves and really try to reach out to people, things get better, because we're going beyond ourselves and we're helping others. So.
Absolutely. No, I absolutely love that. I totally agree. I want to go back to your experience itself. You're having your transplant. You talked about how you came up out of your body, and as you got a few feet away from your body, and then you talked about the voices that you heard and how they weren't kind voices.
Yeah.
I was going to say, with your faith, and you knew that you could you had some authority over these voices. You knew that you could change that situation.
Right.
I guess I've talked to quite a few experiences who have similar types of things where the fear kicks in, they're a little bit frightening.
Yes.
What do you think would have happened if you didn't have that knowledge, if you'd listened to the voices?
Well, you know what? Of course, I'm a believer in Jesus Christ. So there's enemies of our soul that just want to destroy us in our minds, in our heart, in our emotions. And so, that's where I come from, that perspective. But let's say, just think about your childhood. These tapes play over in your head. Maybe you came from a family that was really dysfunctional and they were saying, you'll never amount to anything. Who do you think you are? Those kind of voices even carry with us through life. And even in that incident, we have to say, no, I'm more than that. I know who I am. It's like a reassurance of yourself. And I'll tell you the truth. For me, I wouldn't be the person I am, one, without God. Number two, without my wife, because God brought me together with my wife, and opposite attract. And sure enough, we're opposite. But she was able to see past a lot of things, that the baggage I brought into my marriage just from my childhood, and she was able to see past that and see the person I was going to be, and she almost had a faith vision for me to be that person. And she didn't nag. She prayed a lot.
She sounds amazing.
and she just, said, we're in this life together. And we both came from families that maybe weren't perfect. And with those voices, whether they're past voices or present voices saying to you that you don't matter, or you'll never get ahead, all those kind of things. It's almost like we have to ourselves say no, almost just say, no, I'm not listening to that. And so that for my Christian faith, I knew those voices were the negative voices of the enemy, and they don't know who I was, obviously, because I said to myself, I'm a child of God. I gave my heart and life to God when I was a young teenager, 19, I think it was. And my life changed. And I said a simple prayer. I grew up in a religious family, went to church, and later on in life, maybe it was just Easter and Christmas. But I went to church, and I had all this knowledge of who God was in my head, but that knowledge didn't reach my heart. And so when it reached my heart, I just said a simple prayer when I was a young man. And I said, God, if you're real, if Jesus, if you're who you say you are, just come into my life and change things and heal me of all my brokenness. Simple prayer. And when I did that, tell you what, I've been on a wild ride for the past, since 1980. So yeah, a wild ride, but a good ride, an exciting ride, an adventurous ride. And so really, I learned even before I was Christian, when I had those voices of my childhood, which was very abusive, I had to learn to cope with that, and then I had to rethink and relearn. And then when I became a Christian, then I realized some of those voices are just out to destroy me. So that's when I put into practice that which I've learned,
Exactly. Now, you talked about how in your experience, when you went to meet your donor, there was Jesus there and Jesus was with your donor. Actually, I'm going to start the question that I know the listeners will be wanting to hear, and that's in my mind, is what did Jesus look like? Did you physically see him, or what happened there?
Okay, so Jesus and the donor, like when you go to the eye doctor and they keep changing those lenses, So it was just like, I'm like, God, this isn't fair. But it was almost like I saw their form, but it wasn't quite clear enough.
Yeah,
and I was like, why did you do that? I knew I saw it, the form and the figure. In fact, it was almost like I was trying to look deeper and trying to kind of see through the haze, kind of to see. I want to see. And I think for me personally, he did that for a purpose. I don't know why, but I just think he did it. But I will say my donor to me looked Middle Eastern. He or she, the form before me. And they had their head down, like in humility, like, why are you thanking me? Like they were humble that I even wanted to thank them. And I think that's because they were in heaven in the presence of Jesus, and there's no boasting there. So, but I'm sure he was thankful that I was thankful, and so, but it was a beautiful, beautiful, I can still see that picture.
That's amazing, isn't it? I really relate to what you said about not being in focus and not quite being able to see, even though you can see. That's very similar to the experience that I have. It was like they were silhouette figures. I wasn't able to see the details or get clarity on who I was looking at. So I resonate with that. Absolutely amazing. Were you able to converse with your donor at all? Was there any kind of conversation that happened other than why are you grateful?
No, I wanted to say so much more, but it was almost, I felt like I couldn't. It was just enough to acknowledge him. And I know he looked at me, the Lord allowed him to see me being grateful, and this is what I say. When people are organ donors, they sign their card or they sign their license or whatever, however they do it in their countries. You really don't think about you're ever going to meet the person you're donating totally your organs to, right? So I think perhaps it was a surprise that I called upon him. The thing about it was, I'm in heaven. I didn't even ask to see Jesus, right? He just appeared, and I didn't ask to see my mom, whom I love, and I didn't ask to see relatives or my favorite dogs. I had lost a lot of my Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, and I'm a dogaholic, and I love my dog. And I always tease my wife, and I said, listen, it says in the Bible that he's preparing mansions in heaven, but all the dogs will be in my mansion, so you'll have to come visit me.
Oh, funny. So you got to see your mother and your past loved ones and your past dogs Did you see them?
No, I didn't. What I'm saying is I wanted to, or, like
Right.
I thought I was just about to see more, but it was such a short visit. I think it was on purpose that it was a very short visit.
Yeah.
One, because I don't know what was happening in the physical realm on Earth with my body. So I don't know how long that transpired where they were trying to bring me back to life. So I think that had a lot to do with it. And I will say, I think I had a choice of what to do because I had these thoughts when I was in heaven. I thought about my wife and my son.
Yeah.
And I thought for a split second, I think I was given the choice at one point. The thought in my mind was like, I could stay or I leave. And then I think in my mind, I made the choice to come back. And the Lord knew that because he said, these are your new lungs, receive them. And I just made a conscious effort to know that I think I was going to return because I feel like I had unfinished work to do.
Yeah. And so you were aware in this experience that you were dead?
I wasn't aware. Well, things were happening during the time I was in a coma. And I was telling my wife, there was so many, I don't know if I was having visions. I don't know how long I was in heaven. So I don't know what was happening. But every once in a while, things come back to me. And that's why I'm wondering, is there a continuing revelation of what would happen there? And so I'm not sure. It's just that the timing, like they weren't, when I was in that coma for 10 days, I wasn't breathing on my own. I mean, they told my wife, I don't know what's going to happen here. I mean, we're hoping for the best, but the machine was breathing for me. So yeah, I don't know. I really don't know that answer to that question.
Interesting. You came back into your body. What were some of the first thoughts you were having or the big questions that you had when you woke up out of that coma?
So I woke up out of the coma. Jeff and my wife, Patty, came into the room. They extubated me. He asked me my experience. I shared to him what happened. He left. Patty was left alone with me. And then for the next couple of days, it was almost as if I was reliving it over and over every day. It was just like, I couldn't believe it happened, in a way. I was like, I went to heaven. And then I don't know what happened. I know Patty was in the room and I don't know if I was taken back to heaven, but I was starting to relive all the sequences of the NDE experience and seeing it clearly, like the angels singing and I told her, because she's asking me about my NDE, what was it like? What'd you see? And so, as a pastor, I was like, I wanted to make sure everything was kosher. So I'm like, what about these rainbow angels? I'm like, is that even in scripture? And I think in Revelations, it says one verse in one of the chapters in Revelation, it says, and I saw an angel with a rainbow over its head. When I read that in the Bible, I thought, there they are. That's my rainbow angels.
Yeah.
So
Isn't that awesome?
It was just confirmation to me that there are rainbow angels in heaven.
Yeah. And that's what I love about your story. What you've relayed to us is that there is backing to that when you're talking about how someone said that you'd gone to see your lung donor and then, they weren't quite believing that. They ended up coming into the hospital asking you that. Was that your son, was it?
My son did come to the hospital. I did tell him, and I told, I don't know, there's a couple of people.
Yeah, there were a couple of bits of proof in there where something had happened while you're in your coma and people had the revelations or had the understanding of things that what you were experiencing while you're in your coma.
Yes.
And then when you woke up, there they were. Yeah.
Yes. I'm now I hear what you're saying. Yes, we told, his name is Jonathan. We told Jonathan, you are spot on because what happened in your bedroom was supernatural. Yeah. And we said that was God confirming to us that what was going on when I died on the table. And he was like, wow, that's awesome. And then, also my wife, she called her sister Kay back and said, it really did happen. And what I
Yeah.
told you in the living room while he was in the coma, it really did happen. And so like my whole in-laws, all my families, we talk about this a lot. And it's just amazing. I mean, like, I don't know. Even as I'm talking to you, reliving and telling the story, I can feel this supernatural presence all around me, like I'm there. I can't explain it. It's just that I think once you've been touched by heaven, you're just never the same. And I had a conversation with my friend Randy Kay, who had an NDE
Yes. I know
experience,
Randy. Yep.
and he goes, Mike, oh yeah, you are. You're speaking to the choir. And he was, because I was saying, this is what I was saying to him the other day. I said, Randy, it's like, I love being alive. I love, don't get me wrong. I love being here on the earth and doing what I'm doing. But there's such a longing to go back to heaven, to that experience where there was no more pain, no more sorrow, no suffering, it's like, I just want to be there. And I know one day I will be. Permanently. But it's just like things have lost their luster here. Like the things that I used to be so interested in before my NDE, it's just like, I don't know, it's not the same, because that experience in heaven it actually gave me an anticipation of what could be. And also it gave me an excitement. I always tease everybody, I'm Norwegian in ancestry. So like my friends call me the Viking warrior. And so I love to explore. I love to see things and go places and stuff like that. And I think that's what the glimpse I got when I was in heaven, while I was standing there, I was like, what else is here? What else can I experience, And so anyway, I was telling Randy that, I asked him, do you miss it? I mean, really, like you're doing all these things here on the earth, but do you miss that experience and he goes, yes, I do. So, yeah.
Is there an element of you feel like you got a bit ripped off, that you didn't get to stay? Do you feel a little bit cheated that you've had to come back and have 56 surgeries and live on oxygen for 5 years? And how do you deal with that? How do you cope with that?
So, okay. I'm not the type of person to ask why, even with my terminal lung disease, I just, man, I thought I would just make the most of it, like pre-transplant, pre-NDE. I was just going gusto, meeting politicians, both sides of the aisle. I was meeting celebrities, and I was doing it for a purpose, to bring awareness to lung disease. But after I came back, it took a long time to get used to anti-rejection meds, and it took a long time to just I don't know, things change in my natural body. I mean, when you get a transplant, I have high blood pressure, I have diabetes, which I no longer have, but I had it for like a year, and just physical body changes because of the anti-rejection meds. But during that time, I still rolled with the punches and thought, I can do this. Not saying I had perfect days where I didn't whine and complain.
Hello.
But there was one time recently I said, Lord, really? I mean, you had me in heaven, and here I am going through a whole mess of stuff, and I could have just been with you forever. So what's the purpose? That's what I was saying. So, but, and then I quieted myself and I thought, wait, what is the purpose? Obviously it wasn't my time, and it was, he sent me back.
Yep, absolutely. I love it. Thinking about that and thinking that it wasn't your time, did you come back? You've talked about how you said your purpose was to go and share your story, share your message. Do you feel like you came back with any burning purpose outside of that? Do you think we all have a set purpose and we can't die until it's done?
Yeah, definitely. I definitely feel that way. Just to give you an example, we live here in Kentucky, in the city of Louisville, right by the Ohio River. And you can hear the cicada bugs behind me.
It's lovely.
But anyway, we live here, and my purpose is to live my life to make a difference with what I know. And so I just believe that I do have a divine purpose. I just feel like God sent me back here. I don't know what for, but I see some things happening because of what I've been through. So I was on a TV show in Nashville, Tennessee, and that door opened out of nowhere. And I'm like talking about my experience. And then I don't know, just people, just to put it down to the everyday level, I was in a hotel in Florida. My sister-in-law was dying. And so we were staying in this hotel near the hospital. And all of a sudden, I just felt impressed to tell my NDE story to the lady at the counter at the hotel.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so, I thought, I hope she doesn't think I'm a kook. I don't know. I'm just gonna tell her what happened. So she actually opened the conversation. She said, "Hey, someone told me that you had a double lung transplant." I said, "Sure did, yeah." And because I had to have a special room where there was no smoke and make sure that it was really clean for being immune suppressed. And so I said, yeah. And just off the cuff, I said, "Oh yeah, I had a double lung transplant. I died on the table, went to heaven, got to thank my donor." And she said, "What? Come over here." Yeah. She was this African American lady. She goes, "I want you to tell me everything."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." So I said, I shared the story I shared with you. And she started tears running down her face. And she said, "Today was one of the hardest days." And she said, "I was losing hope." And she says, "You just sharing about your experience in heaven, it broke something in me and set me free where I don't have a doubt anymore. I believe there's a heaven waiting for me." And to me, that was cool.
That's
if I hadn't come back,
right there. Yeah.
Yeah, if I hadn't come back and shared that with her, I just those are little divine moments, little things that God set ups that I think this is why we're here.
Oh, I love that. I think that all around us, I think we've all got these little divine moments. It's amazing. Yeah. It's interesting. Mike, thank you so much. I would love to continue. I want to chat a little bit more around the spiritual experiences, your spiritual beliefs, how things have changed a little bit since then. But I think we'll take that over to the VIP group because we've been going for a little while now. Yeah, Mike, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. I'm glad you're okay. I know that there is some news at the moment and that you've got some more things coming up medically. So I know that, myself and our listeners, we send you our love. And I just want to thank you so much for coming to share your story with us and just bring such your passion and your faith and everything is really quite outstanding. So Mike Olsen, thank you.
All right. God bless.
Thanks for joining me for another episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to stay updated with all of the events we have going on and to visit www.letstalkneardeath.com to join the VIP community.